Do I look tired? 'Cause I'm tired, boss. It seems I am doomed with the curse of major channel milestones aligning with extremely stressful situations where I got hacked the same day I hit 50,000 subscribers, and now the same week I hit 100,000, I get my first copyright strike because the French distributor for Talk to Me, La Main, decided that the movie made by YouTubers who love film probably don't want YouTubers talking about their film. How nice! Maybe someday I'll actually be able to enjoy a milestone without it being a package deal with immense stress, but hey, at least I have a really cool movie to talk about and blow off some steam. I'm late to the Sinners party, and so this video will have spoilers since I'm assuming most of you have seen the thing already. I kept hearing about how amazing it was, but I have been so busy that I haven't been able to make it out to the theater recently, but then the Nosferatu video ballooned to over 14,000 words at the time I'm making this, and it's still not done, so I put up a poll to see if there was still any interest in me talking about the movie despite being so late to it. I often forget that it's not just the people who watch all my videos who can see community posts, and also that text doesn't provide clear tone, so my extreme sarcasm in that post was taken quite literally by a number of people. I was not aware that part of my identity was only talking about bad movies, but you learn something new every day, even about yourself. Anyway, Sinners comes from writer, director, and co-producer Ryan Coogler, and I did not know a thing about it going in aside from the fact that there were vampires and Michael B. Jordan in it, which are two things that I like. I have been living in the oasis of not watching trailers, which is making first viewing so much more enjoyable. I can't recommend it enough. And I'm really glad that I went into this one not knowing anything about it. So to clear the air for those who thought I was trashing Sinners in that post, I'll make this as clear as I possibly can. Sinners is fucking awesome. I always like when a movie is able to strike a balance between being really fun and entertaining and easy to engage with, while also having very clear thematic purpose without those two things being at odds with each other. And Sinners deals with some subject matter that I thought they explored wonderfully and in a very nuanced way, while also delivering an experience that can be had on the surface level of a stylish vampire flick with a great cast. I will do a deep dive down the road, but this is just going to be like some initial thoughts after my first viewing. The movie subject matter is something that I really want to make sure I do my due diligence on, since it's dealing with a culture that is not a part of my direct life experience, so I'm gonna have to do lots of research to have a better grasp of all of it for that video, but it will happen. So Michael B. Jordan plays the role of Smoke and Stack, two twin brothers and army vets who are returning to Mississippi after leaving for Chicago and being involved with the mob. They've recently made a good score and are looking to find new avenues for money making back home, and they decide to open a juke joint, hiring their cousin as a musician along with a handful of others who they feel will fit in well. Well, this is a vampire movie. The actual vampires themselves are not even introduced until a good ways through, which is definitely risky, but if you can spend that time well prior to bringing in the bad guys, it can work. And it really does here. I'll talk about some of the cultural stuff in a second, but I loved the way they spent time building up a sense of space and time. I got so sucked into the world they were building, largely because of how great this cast of characters is, but also because they managed to create this sense of sacrility around the music, which was all the more impactful later on when they were faced with people who tried to take that away from them. I guess the first place to start is going to be with the music, which was done by Ludwig Göransson, so it should come as no surprise that it's absolutely brilliant. Göransson is always so good at incorporating the actual story of the films he writes for into the score in a way that's more than just the emotion of the story being reflected, and some of what he did actually set some things up in a really interesting way, like hinted early at a twist that was going to come later on, which I thought was really cool. Early on, the score is almost entirely acoustic blues, and it's just amazing, but there were slowly these little hints of things you wouldn't really have heard in this period, like electric guitar, for example, which interestingly enough, the electric guitar actually went into mass production the same year that this movie takes place, but the point is that you wouldn't have heard it much for a while, and hearing that sort of thing in the score gave me this sense of timelessness with what was happening, where I was like hearing the future generations of music and where the celebration of this culture was going and the sorts of things that people would be writing in, you know, however many years. Like, no matter what, the music was always going to be core to who they are. It's a cool note in the score, and it wound up actually coming into play later on in the film. Miles Caton plays Sammy, the cousin of the twins, and Holy good God almighty, that dude could summon the spirits of the dead with his voice and playing. Which he does. Seriously, every time this dude started to play, I got chills. And it's also always nice to see that an actor is very clearly actually proficient with the instrument that their character is using. The first long while of the film is spent on setting up this place and time where it was difficult for Black people to have a space of their own without having to worry about being persecuted for celebrating their culture. But there's also a lot in how each character is approaching the birth of this juke joint that's very important for later on. For example, when Stack hears Sammy sing for the first time, they designed the scene perfectly because they let you get sucked into the music and get this sense for how special it is, and then Stack chimes in with, "We're gonna make a lot of money," and it's this moment of like, I mean, yeah, but man, there's more to it than that. That then comes into play later on in the film when the themes of assimilation and cultural appropriation come into focus by using vampirism as a means to explore that, where Stack winds up being the one taken over by this. He heard the music and saw financial gain, which shows that he's willing to leverage this very special part of his culture before acknowledging how beautiful the music actually is. Smoke, while he is also doing this with financial gain in mind, has some more going on that he's struggling to come to terms with, having lost his daughter and losing his relationship with the mother of his child. There's a really sweet and sad scene when he comes to visit his daughter's grave, but I'll save a deeper look at that for another video. Suffice it to say, it's a great and really heart-wrenching sequence. What I loved about the way they portrayed music in this film is that you didn't just have people playing while others watched and liked it. There are a handful of scenes here where it feels like time damn near stands still when someone starts playing. You get lost in the feeling of it, and that part of the movie culminated in what is genuinely one of the best sequences I have seen in a long time. The blues was demonized, treated like the devil's music, only indulged in by bad people, and it was very difficult for Black people to find a space where they could celebrate their culture in peace, which is part of what made this sequence so perfect. The opening of the movie talked about this legend where some people were able to play music so soulful that they would literally reach through time and summon the spirits of the dead and the past and the future. And on the opening night of the Juke, Sammy gets on stage and starts playing, and after a while you begin to see people from other time periods in the crowds with their instruments. Electric guitars, DJ tables, the clothes change, everyone is just lost in this place where time means nothing because the history and future of this culture was all gathering in one place as they transcended time with their music. I was completely entranced by this scene the whole way through, and it was where the movie went from really good to amazing for me. I have a lot more to say about this side of the film, but I don't think it's served as well after just one viewing, so let's talk a bit about the vampire stuff. As I said earlier on, this is a movie that can be enjoyed as a stylish vampire movie, but there is so much more to it than just that. They're using this as a way to explore assimilation primarily, and I thought the way they used the Irish as a contrast was really great. I just thought it was worth mentioning before I get into this that I am approaching this from the perspective of someone who is Irish. My dad was born in Belfast. It's not one of those things where it's like my great-great-great-grandfather was from Ireland. My dad was from Ireland. So Irish culture is very close to my heart and something that feels like home to me. And I just figured that was worth mentioning since this is a very cultural discussion. The Irish were far more comfortable with assimilation than many Black people were for a number of reasons. One, it was just straight up an easier way of life for them since they were white and could just sort of blend in once they took on the culture of the region. But the other big thing is that the oppression Irish people faced was at the hands of a region that they were very far away from now. And so there wasn't a feeling of giving away their culture to the very people who tried to steal it from them. They were able to celebrate Irish culture without facing persecution, and were also more comfortable in welcoming others to do so with them because it wasn't all that invasive and didn't mean conceding their culture to their direct oppressors. For Black people in the South, that was very much so not the case, and juke joints were sort of the only place where they were able to just be with other Black people and indulge in their culture without having to deal with, you know... They represented something very different than an Irish pub, for example. So when people from other backgrounds started to want to join in, it was a threat to the sacrality of what they had. They dealt with this stuff brilliantly. by using vampires as a metaphor for this kind of thing, where we have the main villain of the film, Remick, who's this Irish dude who's become a vampire, and he essentially represents assimilation. But I think there's one important nuance there. Assimilation wasn't something that every single black person was uncomfortable with, and it also, for what it's worth, wasn't something that every single Irish person was comfortable with. Remick represents something a little more specific, that being forced assimilation. What's important is that these juke joints were a very important part of preserving culture and holding on to that sense of identity and history. So while a cultural melting pot on a broad scope was something that not everyone had a problem with, when specifically these bastions of culture are compromised and forcefully turned into something where anyone and everyone can go, it is a threat to what the whole point of these places was. I find it very interesting that Stack is the one who winds up getting bitten and turned, considering he was the most excited about what Sammy's transcendent musicianship could provide financially, almost exploiting the beauty of it because he knows people are aching for a place like this juke joint. There is so much packed into the themes of assimilation in this film, and a hell of a lot of commentary on race and culture, but again, it's something I want to learn more about before I go really in depth on it. I thought it was just fantastic, and the way they handled all that stuff, I have no doubt I'll notice more on subsequent viewings. In terms of the movie on a more surface level, looking at it just as a vampire film, there's so much fun to be had here. The vampires start out only as Remick, who tricks a couple into letting him in by playing into their racism, and he turns them, and they slowly take over more and more people from people who are inside the juke joint when they leave for a second, and others from the surrounding area. Jack O'Connell's performance as Remick was so goddamn good. He's got this really creepy enthusiasm to him, and what I really liked was how he portrayed the nuances in his actual motivations, which are never made entirely clear. There are a lot of ways you can look at his character, and I think he's going to be something I'll talk a lot about down the road. There's this really fun period of the film where Remick and the few others he's turned by this point are trying to get into the juke joint, but because they're vampires, they can only come in if they're invited in. And of course, that's not gonna happen. So they're just slowly picking people off when they step outside for a moment, and eventually manage to upset someone inside enough that they tell them to come in. It's just fun to watch how they try and manipulate and make their way in before the third act's really explosive climax. It's gory, it's action-packed, the effects are really fun. The score, again, has this sense of timelessness which ties into the film's story. It's just a hell of a good time, and the great ensemble cast only helps in making this an extremely easy movie to get lost in. It's a really interesting watch because you have all of that fun, amped up, stylized, bordering on musical at times approach to this crazy movie, but then there's also a lot of really emotional material, like with Smoke's family, all of the cultural commentary, the whole thing with music transcending time, and the ending also leaves quite a few gut punches that I thought worked really well. Sinners is fantastic, and I'm glad I finally got around to seeing it so I can clarify that I don't actually think it's mid. Hopefully I can get that bullshit copyright strike worked out so that I can get that Talk to Me video out for you guys, but only time will tell. I still want to get a video up to thank you in more detail for 100,000 subscribers. It's insane to even say, so I'm hoping to get that done soon. I'm just trying to get my head out of the dirt and back on track. Yeah, a little stressed out right now. Thank you for all the support. You are beautiful people, and I look forward to sharing some of the big projects I've got underway with you. Thanks for watching through to the end. I hope you enjoyed the video enough that you want to see more, and if that's the case, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell because YouTube can sometimes suck at recommending channels. A huge thank you to my wonderful Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members who are a massive help in allowing me to continue committing as much time as I can to making these videos. If you want to gain access to things like behind the scenes material or gain early access to my videos, consider supporting me on either platform. As always, thank you for stopping by Rocklin Graves. I hope you've enjoyed your stay.